What's up, everybody? Just made the drive home. It's always funny doing these late night shows. We did it during the COVID times, doing that drive home from the stadium. It's about 20 minutes door to door, and there's nobody on the road. And it's late at night. It's like 1 a.m, and it lulls you to sleep. So I almost got to get over here and slap my face a little bit, get pumped up because people said we were nuts, Ryan Talbot. But I said, we can't leave Bills Mafia hanging. We got to make sure they have a show to wake up to. And also, we got 45 in here already waiting at the start. People are staying up late. They want to talk about this second round of the draft.
Yeah, that's right. Night two of the draft comes and goes. The Bills do a little bit of wheeling and dealing, trading down twice. It feels like picking up just about every sixth-round pick in this draft class for tomorrow's draft. But they're well positioned to package a lot of those picks, in my opinion, and maybe move up into the fourth round with some of them. Maybe have multiple picks in the fifth round by packaging them up. It's going to be interesting to see what the Bills do because they clearly don't need that many picks, but they can use them to their advantage, whether it's this year or using them for deals for next year's picks.
Welcome into the Shout Football Podcast. We're so glad to have you. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel as well. 7:25 in Hawaii. Very nice. So this is, you just probably had some dinner, put the show on, and we can vibe a little bit. All right, let's start with how this all transpired, because there's a few things I want to kind of get to here that I think are really important. How this materialized, where the Bills, sitting at 57, wound up picking James Cook, the running back out of Georgia, at 63, making two trades down. The first one was with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, moving back 3 spots. The second trade was with the Cincinnati Bengals, moving back 4 spots. And so you make those 2 deals because I think the big thing, Ryan, was they had a lot of people with similar grades on their board. And, Cook, you can probably make the argument that, maybe the Bills jumped a little bit at that particular player. Isaiah Spiller was still on the board at that point. But I think it was a situation where they had so many similar grades on these players, and maybe some interior offensive linemen with a lot of similar grades, the guys that they have rated on day 3, that it was just, all right, let's slide back a couple, accumulate some picks to give us some mobility in later rounds, like you mentioned, and we'll get our guy. And the thing with James Cook that really sticks out is how the Bills view them. I mean, that's one of the things Brandon Beane was talking about that tonight. They don't view him necessarily just as a running back. It's almost like their next version of J.D. McKissick, how they envisioned using him. He played a lot of wide receiver out of the slot. They even lined him outside at Georgia. So I think we're going to see a lot of different ways they can utilize him. And I don't think this means this is much different than the Breece Hall draft pick would have been, because that was a pick that would have, I think, really put some pressure on Devin Singletary. I think this pick is just a supplementary role, especially early on here.
Yeah, and, first and foremost with the 2 trade downs, I was telling you when we were texting back and forth, I really thought they liked Trey McBride, and I think when he went off the board right before their pick, that kind of allowed them to maneuver around the board, trade down a little bit, because as you said, there's a lot of similar prospects that they like, but I think that ultimately landing on James Cook is as close to a home run as you can get in round 2. You are getting a home run hitter at the running back position, an explosive back. I love the McKissick comparison because you can have him in the backfield catching passes from Josh Allen. You can line him up at wide receiver. He brings another dimension to an already explosive offense. So, when you bring James Cook onto this team and he trains and he works out with Singletary, so there's already that relationship there. They know of one another. I think they're going to hit the ground running this offseason, training together. Singletary will share his knowledge of the playbook, the ins and outs of it. It's going to help him get up to speed a little bit as well. And the sooner he's up to speed, Matt, the sooner he can be a key contributor for this offense.
I see 70 people in here on the YouTube channel, Ryan. Make sure you hit that like button. It helps us out. If you're new, if this is the first time you're finding the show, subscribe to the channel as well. A couple other interesting things, and Joshua Allen over on Facebook asked a great question, and we'll talk about that in a minute. What does this mean for Zach Moss? And we can maybe have like a mini sidebar conversation about what the running back room potentially could look like. But a couple things that stood out to me, getting a chance to talk briefly with James Cook today. There was a little bit of a viral moment when he was getting drafted. It looked like, he found out he was going to the Bills, and he had this kind of like really despondent look on his face, and almost like, people were wondering, all right, does he want to go to the Bills? And then there's actually, I saw it before I was heading over here, a TikTok video that somebody got. I don't know if it was from a different stream or what, where it seems like he's saying like, I'm mad. I'm mad. He was saying that to somebody. So you have that part of it, right? Well, I asked James Cook when we talked to him tonight, I was like, what was that moment like? And he was like, it was kind of just chaos. There was his son was crying. It was this life-changing moment. There was a lot of things happening, a lot of moving parts. And I think like the overwhelming nature of just getting drafted in general kind of was, took over. And he said early on in the process, as he met running backs coach Kelly Skipper, he fell in love with the Bills, and he's so excited to be a part of the organization. That's what he said. And a big reason why is because of the vision that they have for him. They're going to let him be him in their offense. The one thing with a player like this, Ryan, if you have a certain skill set, right, you have to land at a team that views what you do positively and has a plan for how to deploy you. Marquise Brown in Baltimore is a perfect example about how a player can be mismanaged. He's been trying to get traded out of Baltimore for 2 seasons. I think players, will start coming into the league and looking around and be like, okay, yeah, I want to get drafted. I want to get to the NFL, but I also want to find a place where I'm going to be used right. And I think this is a situation where it seems like James Cook feels like he can be at his best and have the most production that he can have.
Yeah, going back to the facial expression, don't read too much into that. I had people in my timeline comparing it to Stephon Gilmore when he was drafted here. Resting Bill's face maybe when you weren't excited to join Buffalo, but that's not the case. James Cook's really excited to join a Super Bowl contender, be that missing piece. He talked about, shocking the world, winning a Super Bowl. I'm not sure if you're shocking the world when you're already the Super Bowl favorite and you're joining this team, but I like the sentiment nonetheless. Some people just show their emotion differently, and you nailed it in terms of all the chaos that's going around you. The screaming, the yelling. You saw his brother Delvin going nuts when he was getting drafted. So you get those phone calls where you talk to the GM, you talk to the coach, and sometimes the ownership, and maybe you couldn't hear that. You have a baby crying, you have a lot of noise. It's a lot to take in at that moment in time. So it's understandable that he was a little overcome with emotion in some way, shape, and form. But being managed in today's NFL, Matt, is really important because players more than ever seem to have a lot of power in terms of maneuvering what they can do, where they can go. We're seeing more and more wide receivers saying, listen, and I know Cook's not a receiver, but the example right now, at least around the NFL, is that they're realizing their value and saying, I need to get paid now. All of these players have shorter shelf lives. You're out of the league in your early 30s generally, so you got to get the money when you can, and it's important to be in the right fit so that way your talents can be utilized. In Buffalo, Cook's going to be utilized as a pass catcher, as a running back, as that guy that can make those big plays. If you're going against a defense where you have extra defensive backs out there on the field, maybe you give him a few extra carries in that game, because if he can get past that first line of defense, he's off to the races. He's that athletic. He's that, he has that extra gear that this offense is currently lacking at the running back position.
James Cook and Devin Singletary are friends already. They train together out in Miami in the offseason. Obviously, you have that Florida connection with a lot of these guys. Stephon Diggs played with Cook's brother, Dalvin, in Minnesota. So, there's a very small circle there. And he was very adamant that he's got a great relationship with Motor Singletary. He's expecting to create a 1-2 punch. And that's interesting because if it's a 1-2 punch, three's a crowd. And Zach Moss is sitting out there right now, probably wondering where things stand with him. They brought in Duke Johnson. He's going to be obviously somebody that competes for a role in that defensive backfield, but you can pretty much give him no role, make him inactive most weeks and have him be, in case of an emergency. And I think he'd be probably okay with that on this team. Moss is an interesting case. I asked Brandon Brandon Beane about the interior offensive line in the second round and the third round. And we're going to get to the third round in a minute. There were certain players, interior offensive line guys that they brought in that, you'd wonder if they had a good grade on him. And he said, yeah, we liked them. We liked some of those guys, but I think it was just, he didn't say this, but I'm just reading between the lines. It was just a big collection of guys that were super close together. And so I brought up Cody Ford and I said, all right, so do you believe in Cody Ford still? Is that part of the equation here? Because that's one question we keep getting a lot, Ryan, is like, all right, can the Bills just trade Cody Ford? And my sense is from his response is that Cody Ford's going to be given every opportunity to make this team, number one, and B, earn a job, as crazy as that might sound. And, he mentioned Aaron Cromer, a reset there. He mentioned the fact that he's healthy and he hasn't had any surgeries this offseason. His body's in the best shape that it's been in. He's got some things he's got to do himself. He's got to come in here and take care of business, make sure his body's right, get in here and compete for a spot. But, he said he still believes in Cody Ford. So I think that he could be potentially in play a little bit more maybe than we even think.
Yeah, running back position, the depth, it's interesting. Zach Moss, it wasn't that long ago that the Bills spent a day 2 pick on him. He obviously, as a rookie, he suffered an injury late in the season, that playoff time, and then last year, never really was able to hit the ground running. So there could be some value there. We talked going into this draft about how some teams could move up with a pick and a player. Maybe that's the case for him, or maybe they bring him in just like a Cody Ford scenario. We're going to give you every opportunity to make this team, Zach, but now it's kind of a numbers game. We have Devin Singletary, who ended the year on a high note. We drafted James Cook for a very specific reason. We brought in Duke Johnson to be a pass catcher. He's okay kind of being that Matt Breida of the team where he's inactive most weeks, but if we want to try to change it up, if there's an injury, he can come in. So now Moss, it's up to him if they bring him to training camp and things of that nature to show that, hey, you drafted me for a reason, that there's still something I can do. Don't forget about me just yet. But it's definitely tough. As for the offensive linemen, I thought in round 3, there was still some really good interior linemen out there, and they still went a different route there. But entering day 3 of the draft tomorrow, there's still a few pre-draft visitors, top 30 visitors that are on the board that I like early on day 3. There's still some depth there just in general. So maybe the Bills looked and they said, okay, running back, that's going quick. Once Breece Hall went, it wasn't much longer that you saw Kenneth Walker go. And then you saw Wan'Dale Robinson, who, yes, he's more of a wide receiver, but you could have lined him up in your backfield. He ran the ball quite a bit in his 2 seasons, I believe, at Nebraska before he moved on here to Kentucky. So there were options that were suddenly coming off the board. And I even said after the Robinson pick, is it James Cook or bust here pretty soon or on night 2? And sure enough, it ultimately ended up being that way. I think the Bills got a premier back when that talent level started to fall off a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we could probably transition to the 3rd round pick because I think that's the one that Bills fans probably have the most questions about. It was a very interesting name. I had to do some very quick research because he wasn't on my radar at all. And I actually, interestingly enough, the Bills picked the back end of the 3rd round. Dane Brugler has a 4th round grade on Terrell. Look at me, Bernard. I called him Terrell Brandon, so I had to think about it for a second because I back in the day played for the Timberwolves, loved that player. I spelled his name wrong in a tweet. But 6 foot, just under 6'1", 224 pounds, size profile, absolutely impeccably similar to Matt Milano. Almost so that you look at some of his pictures in the Baylor defense and he looks like a safety. I mean, he's really small. And a lot of people, mention that on social media. Well, Matt Milano was a safety at Boston College. I mean, they kind of converted him into a linebacker. So I thought that was interesting, but check this out, Ryan. I want to bring this in here. Here we go. This just happened a minute before we started. Wait a second now. Now it's not working.
The joys of technology.
I had it all lined up, ready to go, but we're still talking about the running back. So I didn't bring it in, and now I'm trying to bring it in. Share screen, Chrome tab. Here we go. Let's try this. That work?
Yeah, I see it. Well, I see it at the bottom. Yep, there we go.
See that right there?
Ooh.
Tyrel Dotson with a 1:30 a.m. tweet that just reads bet ... Listen, these guys are ultra competitive, right? And so they'll look for any type of edge. But, they move on from AJ Klein. They don't sign any linebackers in free agency, veteran linebackers. And you go into the draft and you see Kyer Elam finally addressing the cornerback position. Then you go offense and you bring in a playmaker in James Cook. You're probably sitting there, Tyrel Dotson, thinking, man, I love the way this thing is shaping up. Then you look up and they're reaching on a linebacker. Let's be honest. From the outside looking in, it seems like a reach. We're going to get into some of the reasonings that Brandon Beane gave in a moment. But if you're Tyrel Dotson sitting there right now, this definitely ups the pressure. You had a pretty nice role. It probably a cushiony role for you going in training camp. Things change quite a bit now because there's versatility in Bernard's game. He can play middle linebacker if you need him to. He probably projects more as a will outside linebacker. He's going to play some special teams as well. This is direct competition for Tyrel Dotson.
100%. And, Mark Gahn put up the tweet shortly after Bernard was drafted. Pretty much identical height, identical weight, and then Bernard's slightly faster than Matt Milano. Bernard says that Milano's one of those linebackers that he loves to study when he's watching, the film, NFL players on film. So it's really interesting comparison. But you're right. Now you have Dotson, someone that's been in the room for quite a few years, who feels a little bit threatened over the job. Bernard was not on my radar either. There were a lot of linebackers that I thought could have been. But he had one of the most insane performances in Sugar Bowl history. One of the best defensive performances in Sugar Bowl history. 17 tackles, 2 sacks, and a pass defensed in their 21-7 win over Ole Miss. So, he's shown glimpses of what he can do. It's just he's a little undersized, and I've seen a lot of comments here in the chat, Matt, about pretty much how this guy has no chance of ever being a starter because they have Milano in Buffalo and this, that, and the other. Well, maybe there's not a direct path to a starting job as a rookie or even year 2. But you have to remember that when the Bills draft these guys, they're also thinking, what happens if there's an injury? You're one injury away from losing Matt Milano and not having him on the field. And he's only played a full season, I believe, once in his career. Now, he played 16 games this year, and he played 16 as a rookie. Obviously, there's 17 games this year, but he missed a few games in 2018, 2019, and 2020. So it doesn't hurt to have someone that's very comparable, that if you think you can coach them up, bring them along, you wouldn't really be missing a beat athletically. In terms of those coverage skills, you look at the other teams in the AFC East, they're getting more athletic. The Jets are having an outstanding draft. The Dolphins obviously added Tyreek Hill. The Patriots, I can't say are having a good draft, but hey, they're still in the division and they have some talent on that roster already. So you're also kind of playing chess against who you're going to be seeing 2 times a year as well. And what kind of looks you might want to give them. So I didn't have an issue with the pick. I was beating the drum for a guard that was taken the next pick after by the Raiders, but there's still a few pre-draft visitors, like I said. There's still some really interesting talent out there on the board as we approach day 3.
No, I think the thing with Bernard that I think stands out is the entire package, right? He's a young, hungry, little bit doubted, probably chip on his shoulder kind of guy because of the measurables. And he brings versatility and speed in the coverage game, which I think the Bills are really going to like. Check out this quote from Brandon Beane when he talked about him. First of all, what I really respect this about Brandon Beane. He does such a great job of organizational structure, like communication with every level of his organization. And one of the things he's always talked about is the important collaboration between the personnel team, the front office, and the coaching staff. And he really leans on coaches. I remember talking to him about how he came to find John Feliciano as a free agent. And he said, I leaned on Bobby Johnson. He had a good experience with him in Oakland. And so we leaned on him to give us the intel that we needed. He said that he sent Bobby Babich, who's now goes from being the safeties coach over to being now the linebackers coach, sent him out to work him out privately. And a lot of guys come back coaches will come back from those workouts and say, all right, X, X, and X, these guys, they did it really good. You know, you can see the athletic traits, but it's going to take some time for them to really understand the scheme, understand what we want to do with them, and try to like utilize what they do. Apparently Bobby Babbage came back from working out with Bernard and said immediately, this guy's going to fit in right. He picked it up like that. He's going to fit in from day one. It's going to be seamless. It's going to be, you know, every week. And then they reached out to his coach at Baylor, Dave Aranda, who used to be at LSU, and apparently Sean McDermott and Brandon have a really good relationship with him. And Brandon Beane said he could not say enough about this kid's leadership, his work ethic, his habits. He's an alpha leader of that defense. He couldn't say enough good things about him. And we've talked to Aranda before when he had guys at LSU and now at Baylor. He will shoot you straight. He's not just giving you the company line. So we took that and what we saw, what he said matched with what Bobby got, and obviously what we saw on film. So this is a guy that they believe, you know, can be that special teams standout because of the work ethic and the way that he plays the game. And then he's going to be a very important rotational piece, depth piece for you on that linebacker spot. Maybe you can throw him out there in some packages when, you know, you need some speed, but you need some size. He said the way that he blitzes and his knack for blitzing, like you mentioned, it reminds them of their safeties like Poyer and Hyde. So it's almost like he's going to be a hybrid piece, a chess piece. We've talked so much over the years about that big nickel spot. This kind of feels like that in a bit of way. At least they have the option to use it that way.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting if you look at his relative athletic score, he's something like an 8.8 or something like that. And it jumps up if you were to convert him to the safety position. But so if you want to use him like a big nickel like that, use him as a blitzer, use him in coverage, whatever the case may be, he can do that. And that's what's really interesting, though, is those little pieces of information, those little nuggets of information that you learn after the fact when they draft that, you know, this guy was a private workout. They obviously had private workouts with 2 Oklahoma linebackers. I'm sure they had many more as well. So they're evaluating all those guys on many levels. And to know that this player specifically picked up the defense really well. And then you go and you talk to the coaching staff and you talk to people there, and he passes all those tests in terms of what the Bills look for in players, the leadership, the guys that eat, sleep, and breathe football. He seems to meet all of that criteria. So maybe there's not a direct path for him to be a starter as a rookie, which there's not, obviously, with the talent that they have at linebacker. But you're not thinking short term when you make some of these picks. You're thinking long term. You're thinking of someone that you can utilize in a variety of ways. So, yes, I understand some Bills fans were not thrilled with the pick. But the Bills obviously did their homework on it and came out feeling really good about Bernard.
I had a little bit of a back and forth with a fan today. His name's Jim, and sometimes he disagrees with stuff that I say, and it's great. We have a good back and forth relationship. I have that with a lot of Bills fans, as you do. And we were just talking about the line depth, and you know, the more and more I start to think about it, the offensive line, it really is just about set. As crazy as that might sound, I mean, you sign Ryan Bates to that deal. In a lot of ways, you view him at least in pencil. You write him with pencil as the starting guard. So with Saffold, Mitch Morse, and Bates inside, Dawkins and Spencer Brown on the outside, you sign Quessenberry. You have Doyle. There are your 2 tackles. You have Bobby Hart as that practice squad, like other competition piece, whatever you want to call him. Then you look on the interior. You got Greg Mance. You got Ike Butker. You got the other kid that they like, Kappa, I think it is, Jacob Capra. And then obviously Cody Ford, who, like we talked about at the top, they still believe in. So I think that there's not the same, you know, when they drafted Cody Ford, they were looking for a starter. They're not looking for a starter right now, Ryan, on the offensive line. So I think that the value really in a deep draft class, when there hasn't been really a run on interior offensive line yet, is coming on day 3. And that's just the long and short of it. You know, John brings up Dylan Parham. I thought that was right in line there. They could have picked him up in the 3rd round there. But what's more important to them? Where's the gap between Dylan Parham and whoever interior offensive lineman you want to name down the list? I don't have a bunch of names on day 3 at the ready here for you. But as compared to the work they did on Bernard, the obvious value that they feel that he adds right away, and all the different things he can do. He plays special teams. He'll be one of your top, backup guys. He'll be able to develop in practice going up against Josh Allen. Like how good is that going to make him for facing the modern quarterback, the modern offense? So it's a situation where I just think Brandon Beane's hit on draft picks on day 3 at offensive line almost every year that he's done this. And so now, Wyatt Teller obviously being the biggest example, and he developed somewhere else, but it's still the same case. So, so I just don't think that there was any urgency to address interior offensive line. And I think at the end of the day, you want your front office, your general manager, especially with the track record Beane has, to go with the guys they truly believe in at the end of the day. I think that's what this is all about. Even if it's not the guys that, you liked a lot from the research you did or the tape that you watched. Like, that's another funny thing that I always get. And no offense to anybody that like really does the work, the film work and breaks these guys down. I have a pretty good feeling that they did their due diligence on James Cook and Terrell Bernard and are confident with what they saw of these guys on tape and aren't concerned with the things that, a lot of people maybe be hung up on. They don't make these picks without being confident in that. And they're not all going to pan out either, but, enough for this regime have.
You said Terrell Bernard again, just an FYI.
Shoot, I'm going to always say it. Yo, shout out to Terrell Bernard. I used to roll with him on NBA 2K, his crossover back in the day. And actually, it wasn't even 2K. It was on Sega Genesis. And it was like the Portland Trail Blazers versus the Chicago Bulls. That was like the cover. Yep. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about.
And maybe that wasn't the game. One of the versions, maybe it was like NBA Live. I think that was
that,
like
or
NBA
like
Live.
Game Time or something.
Game Time or something. But Terrell Bernard, for whatever reason, and that's why I keep saying his name, he was just nasty in that game. So sorry, you're gonna get Terrell Bernard a lot, probably.
That's awesome. But no, O-line talk. Listen, the one reason I was thinking Parham is he had that guard center versatility. Bills love players like that. Especially when you consider, Saffold, the age, the fact that he could miss some time. Morris, he has been outstanding, but he's missed some time in his career, not just in Buffalo, but just in general. But you're right. You look at the list there, in general, there's a lot of still very solid interior offensive linemen out there. There's still 2 pre-draft visitors, I believe. Now, at the end of the draft, the picks are kind of flying quickly, but I know that they like Joshua Izudu. He is out of UNC. I think he could be on their radar if he's there tomorrow. And then Spencer Burford is another pre-draft visitor that is still available for the Bills. So 2 guys, if that is something that's in the cards for them, that they could address early on day 3 in round 4, maybe one of them falls into round 5. I think Burford's projected to be a 4th, 5th round guy. So he might be the target if they don't go that way in round 4. And there's still some talented players at wide receiver. Kelvin Austin III, undersized, but explosive, fast. I know a lot of fans were beating the drum for that as well. The Bills do the due diligence. They watch the film. They send scouts all over the country. You just have to trust that, they know what they're doing. And based on their track record for the most part, because every team has misses, they've done a great job of building this thing up since Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott have come aboard.
Listen, there have been several runs on wide receiver in this draft now. 2 in particular, the one in the first round and the one in the, I think it was early 3rd round when there was people flying. Maybe it might have been 2nd round. I can't remember now. But it's the run that ended in Sky Moore, which I can't believe Sky Moore was a guy that was a fringe 1st round guy. And some of the names that flew off the board ahead of him, looking back at it now, really, really shocking. I know Wan'Dale Robinson, a lot of people like him, depending on who you talk to. And, Brian Dable, he knows the role that he's probably drafting Wan'Dale Robinson for. And I know, Joe Shane came out and said they're not trading Kadarius Toney. They're not shopping him, but, the writing's on the wall there for them to move him out and maybe make a role for Robinson. But the fact that the Bills have had not even an iota of a push to go out and get a wide receiver in this draft class, to me, speaks to what I was talking about weeks ago and how they view Gabriel Davis, number 1, the trust that they have in Isaiah McKenzie. Like, say Jamison Crowder comes in here and it doesn't work from the start, right? They'll go to plan B, which is Isaiah McKenzie, which has worked every time they've gone to him in this offense. Now you add James Cook to the mix, who is almost like this, de facto receiver that you can use in all these different sets potentially, and all these, different formations that Joe Brady and Ken Dorsey can kind of dream up here over the next few months. I really like what they did. And now you have all this, artillery to kind of make some big shots in on day 3. Listen, I don't think that they have to use all 4 of those day or 6-round picks. Maybe you trade up, but Brandon Beane has found some talent late at the receiver position before, and I think that that's something that maybe they look at the receiver spot on day 3.
Yeah, absolutely. And I did see Bill's Mafia there in the chat saying Zudu was taken in round 3. So thank you for that, because as the picks are coming up, some aren't even coming on the screen. It just says the pick is in, it goes to commercial break. So you miss a few here and there. So I appreciate that. Day 3, that there are still positions to address. There's still depth to address. They worked out so many different tight ends. There's still a few there, top 30 visits and private workout guys. They could go that route because you have Dawson Knox, OJ Howard, both of whom are free agents at the end of the season. I anticipate Knox being a part of their long-term plans, but you might want to bring in another option there to be tight end 3 this year, compete for that job. Interior lineman we talked about. There's punters. I see the comments for Matt Ariza, the punt god, and obviously Jordan Stout of Penn State. So one of those picks could be used to select the punter. Maybe you trade some of them to move up a little bit. Depending on where they're going to go. Wide receiver, depending on what the Bills are looking for, whatever their cup of tea is, there are still players out there. There's still some speedsters. There's still some bigger receivers or good route runners. So it comes down to what they want there. And then, defensively, whatever else they may be looking to address. So plenty of talent and options, because so many players went back last year, Matt. Due to COVID having that extra year available to them. So this is not like a normal day 3 in years past. And obviously every year there's still talented players in day 3, but I feel like there's more than ever. So the Bills are going to use some of those picks, and they're going to get people that are going to have a legitimate shot to compete, despite this being a Super Bowl roster as is.
All right, let's look ahead to day 3. You mentioned it a little bit. What are you looking? It doesn't even have to be player specific, because I'll be honest with you, I don't really have the deep dive on day 3 in my on the holster, ready to pull out the gun and shoot a bunch of names at you. But I think approach here is going to be interesting. How do you think Brandon Beane approaches this day with, kind of having to sit on his hands a little bit to start, not picking till the end of round 5? Do you think they get aggressive and package some of that to move up and get one specific person? Do you think punter comes into play? Because I will read you the quote. He was asked about punter, how early is too early to go after him. He's like, depends on how good the punter is. We have to see who's on the board tomorrow. He said, like any position, if there's one that we think is worth drafting, obviously we don't have a 4th, but if there's one worth drafting the 5th, we'll see what position players are there. And if he was worth it, we do it. He said he thinks there's some guys, and I think there's some guys after the draft too. He said, look around there. There's always punters that go undrafted and end up making it. I don't think it's a must to draft one, but I do think there will be some drafted. So interesting comments there from Brandon Beane today.
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me whatsoever if the Bills packaged some picks, moved up. They could package some day 3 picks from next year's draft too to kind of make it work if there's really someone that was out there that they really like. They don't necessarily have a need at defensive tackle, but there's Perry and Winfrey, someone that they had a private workout with. There's still multiple tight ends, like I told you. Isaiah Likely, he was all over a lot of different draft experts' boards. Some of them he was as high as the second best tight end in this class. They brought in another who was a tight end that was injured, James Mitchell. So he's in play, so there's a lot of guys, but punters specifically, absolutely. Mr. West Ashley, Motor is out, and then saying that you don't know what you're talking about with Moss. I'm guessing with people in the comments fighting about that. Moss has not shown much over these last few years. I think Singletary's spot is pretty set in stone on this roster, where I cannot say the same for Moss. So just to address some of the comments that I'm seeing in the comments there, but for the Bills, there's no shortage in terms of what they can do, where they can go with this. Brandon Beane is very honest in terms of, hey, we're going to go the best player available. Now, they're not going to go at a position where they're at the deepest, where they don't necessarily need someone if they're not going to make this roster, because that's going to be the last thing. What chance does this player have of making our roster? They don't want to just pick guys to pick guys. It has to be someone that's going to have a legitimate shot to come in and compete for a spot on that 53-man roster. And you mentioned it. Punter obviously is one where I think if you take him in round 5, if you take one even in round 6, that's someone that should be able to beat out Matt Hawk, depending on what you're looking for from your punter.
Where are we going to be on Sunday, Ryan? Why don't you give everybody a little if they want to come out and meet us? Because Franklinville, that is like Ellicottville, right? Is that where that is?
No.
Or no, it's different. Right.
different
So
than
let me give you the stage then to introduce this.
Yeah, absolutely. So we were approached about coming out to the Franklinville Maple Festival on Sunday. So we're going to be there early. Matt has some TV obligations to meet, so we'll be there for a few hours, though. Would love any Bills Mafia members that live in that area that feel like traveling out there. I know that they're known for their pancake breakfast in the morning. It's just like a carnival or a festival. There's rides, there's vendors, I know there's going to be someone next to us, Matt, that sells sports cards and memorabilia. So there's going to be a little bit of everything. So if you want to come out, meet Matt, myself, show your support for the Shout Buffalo Football Podcast, we would love to meet you on Sunday in Franklinville at the Maple Festival.
Beautiful. I can't wait to drive out, and actually my wife and my kids are coming out there. So if you follow me on Twitter, you probably see my wife on there. She's gotten real active on Twitter these last couple of months. She'll be out there. You get to meet her as well. Ryan's bringing the family, so it's going to be a family affair. Also, Syracuse.com/newsletters. Go there. You can sign up for the new newsletter that we just launched. There'll be a big one in your inbox on Monday if you sign up. I think that's all we got for you. Like and subscribe on the YouTube channel as always. Leave us a review. Subscribe on the audio platforms as well if you're listening to this on audio. And we'll be back tomorrow. I gotta go get some sleep, Ryan. I'm exhausted.
Yeah, time to crash. Noon will be here before we know it. Day 3 of the draft, and day 3 flies even faster than day 2 in terms of keeping track of all those picks and players, and we'll keep it locked in, Bills Mafia. So stick with us. We'll eventually go live either tomorrow or Sunday, wrapping it all up, and keep your eyes out for an undrafted free agent tracker as well once the draft concludes.